What you're looking at right now is an ant dreaming. I know how that sounds. We've spent decades, centuries really, assuming that insects are biological robots. No thoughts, no feelings, no inner life. Just tiny automatons running on hardwired instinct, executing genetic programming with no awareness of what they're doing or why. The ant doesn't know it's an ant. It doesn't know anything. It's a machine. That's what we told ourselves. But here's the thing about assumptions in science. The longer they go unchallenged, the more they start to feel like facts. And this particular assumption, that insects are mindless, that their behavior is purely mechanical, that there is nothing going on inside that tiny exoskeleton, went unchallenged for a very long time. Until someone actually looked. And what they found didn't just challenge the assumption. It dismantled it entirely. By the end of this video, you're going to know things about ant cognition that most people will never learn. And I'll warn you now, once you know them, you cannot unknow them. The way you look at the insect world will never be quite the same. 3 questions. Do ants actually sleep? Do they actually dream? And if they do, what on earth could an ant possibly dream about? Let's find out. Part 1. They actually sleep. For most of the 20th century, the scientific consensus on insect sleep was simple and confident it doesn't exist. The reasoning seemed airtight. Sleep, scientists argued, is a biological luxury, a state that evolved to serve complex nervous systems that need periodic maintenance. Insects don't have complex nervous systems. Therefore, insects don't need sleep. If an ant goes still, it's resting. It's conserving energy. It's waiting. It is not sleeping, in any meaningful sense of the word. That consensus collapsed in 2009. Entomologist Dr. Debbie Castle at the University of South Florida decided to do something deceptively simple. She actually watched. She built a glass-enclosed artificial fire ant colony, complete with 3 queens, 30 workers, and 30 larvae, and she filmed every single ant continuously around the clock in macro camera detail. No assumptions, no shortcuts, just observation. What she found shocked the field. Ants don't just rest, they sleep. Worker fire ants take up to 253 micro naps per day, each one roughly 60 seconds long. They don't just stop wherever they happen to be standing. They move deliberately, away from the colony's main foot traffic, toward the walls and ceiling of the chamber, fold their antennae downward, curl slightly, and go completely still. The behavior is deliberate, structured, ritualistic. That alone was surprising. But what came next was the real test. Because here's the thing about sleep versus rest. When you poke a resting animal, it reacts instantly. Its nervous system is still fully engaged with the outside world. When you poke a sleeping animal, it takes significantly more force, more stimulus, more disruption to get any response at all. The brain has partially disconnected from external input. Scientists call this an elevated arousal threshold, and it is the single most important criterion for distinguishing true sleep from simple inactivity. It's the gold standard. Castle tested it, and Castle's ants had it. Active nestmates could physically walk over the sleeping ants. They could bump into them, step on them, brush directly past their bodies, and the sleeping ants didn't flinch, didn't stir, didn't react. They were gone, completely non-responsive to a world that was still moving and buzzing all around them. That is not resting. That is sleeping. And here's a detail that makes this even more striking. The sleep isn't random. The colony manages its sleep as a collective resource. Worker ants rotate through their micronaps in staggered cycles, ensuring that at any given moment, roughly 80% of the workforce remains active. The colony never fully goes offline. It has solved the problem of sleep the way a hospital solves the problem of staffing, shifts, rotations, a system designed to keep the operation running while still giving individuals the rest they need. But once Castle confirmed they were sleeping, once she established that beyond any scientific doubt, she noticed something happening during that sleep that nobody had anticipated. Part 2. REM sleep. To understand what Castle found, you need to understand what dreaming looks like from the outside. In 1953, a young researcher named Eugene Aserinsky was studying sleeping subjects at the University of Chicago. He attached electrodes to their scalps and eyelids and watched the readouts. During certain phases of sleep, something strange happened. The brain suddenly surged with electrical activity, not the slow, quiet waves of deep rest, but fast, chaotic signals almost identical to a fully awake brain. And simultaneously, the subject's eyes began moving, rapidly, erratically, darting back and forth beneath closed lids as if watching something only they could see. He called it REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And when he woke those subjects during these episodes, they reported vivid, immersive dreams almost every time. The connection was clear. REM is the biological fingerprint of dreaming. The brain is fully active. The body is temporarily paralyzed, a safety mechanism preventing the sleeper from physically acting out whatever they're experiencing. And the sleeper is somewhere else entirely, inside a vivid, internally generated world. Now go back to Castle's ant colony. When the ants slipped into their deepest sleep, bodies curled, antennae folded, completely non-responsive, something began to happen that Castle did not expect. Their antennae started to twitch, not gently, not randomly, rapidly, erratically, in precisely the same motion pattern an ant uses when it's actively, intensely tracking a pheromone trail while awake. When it's smelling something, that demands its full attention. The antennae were firing, as if the ant was experiencing something urgent, something real, something that mattered. And Castle saw the parallel immediately. REM sleep is defined by the involuntary rapid movement of the organ the animal uses to experience its waking world. For humans, that organ is the eyes. We see the world, so during dreaming sleep, our eyes move. For ants, the primary organ of perception is the antennae. An ant's antennae are its eyes, its ears, its nose, and its fingertips, all combined into two extraordinary sensory instruments that process the chemical and tactile information that constitutes the ant's entire experience of reality. And during the deepest phase of sleep, those antennae were firing on their own, without any external input, as if the brain was generating its own internal sensory experience. She named it REM sleep, rapid antennal movement. Now, and this matters, there is a hard line between what is confirmed science and what remains theory. Both sides of that line are extraordinary, but intellectual honesty requires keeping them separate. What is confirmed? Fire ants experience structured polyphasic sleep cycles. During their deepest sleep phase, they exhibit muscular relaxation, elevated arousal thresholds, and RAM, involuntary rapid antennal twitching. This has been observed, documented, replicated, and published in peer-reviewed literature. It is fact. What is theory? That RAM represents a subjective experience, that something is happening inside that brain that we would recognize as a dream. But the theory is far from isolated. In 2022, Dr. Daniela Relaire at the University of Konstanz was studying jumping spiders and discovered that during sleep, their internal retinal tubes shift rapidly back and forth in a pattern directly analogous to human REM. In 2010, researchers found that sleep-deprived honeybees showed severe deterioration in the precision of their waggle dance, the remarkable symbolic communication system bees use to convey the exact location of food sources to their nestmates. The bees needed sleep to consolidate spatial memory, just like mammals do. And octopuses, during what researchers call active sleep, cycle through rapid full-body color changes, their chromatophores firing in sequences that appear to replay visual experiences from their waking hours. The octopus, quite literally, appears to dream with its skin. The pattern across species is impossible to ignore. The deeper science goes, the more it looks like REM-equivalent sleep, active, memory-consolidating, potentially experience-generating deep sleep, is not a mammalian invention. It is ancient. It is widespread. It may be a fundamental property of any nervous system complex enough to learn. Part 3. What an ant dreams about. Human dreams are visual. We dream in faces, landscapes, motion, light, because vision is the dominant sense of the human brain, and the visual cortex dedicates an enormous amount of processing power to constructing and interpreting images. When our brain generates a dream, it generates a visual one. It's the native language of human cognition. An ant does not live in that world. An ant's primary interface with reality is chemical and tactile. It navigates by pheromone trails laid invisibly across the ground. It recognizes its nestmates not by their faces. Ants have compound eyes that produce relatively low-resolution images, but by the unique blend of cuticular hydrocarbons on their exoskeleton, a chemical fingerprint as individual as a human face. It detects food sources, identifies threats, locates its queen, and communicates complex social information, all almost entirely through smell and touch, processed through those two extraordinary antennae. So, if REM sleep is the brain replaying and consolidating the day's most important sensory experiences, which is precisely what REM sleep does in mammals, strengthening the neural pathways that encode the day's most significant events. Then an ant is not dreaming in images. It is dreaming in smells. The ant's mushroom bodies, paired structures in its brain that handle olfactory learning and associative memory, roughly analogous in function to the human hippocampus, are almost certainly the seat of whatever is happening during REM sleep. They are replaying the day's chemical data, reinforcing the scent trails that led to food, encoding the alarm pheromone signatures of threats encountered, deepening the recognition of the queen's unique chemical profile. Try to imagine, for a moment, what that experience might actually feel like from the inside. A sharp, escalating concentration of sugar, growing stronger, more directional, pulling toward something just out of reach. The sudden acidic burst of alarm pheromones, flooding in from all directions, carrying urgency and danger without any visual image attached. The deep, familiar, comforting chemical signature of the queen. The scent that means safety, home, colony. Abstract three-dimensional geometries of chemical gradient. A navigable landscape built entirely out of invisible information. No images, no words, no faces or colors or light. Just an olfactory hallucination. Rich, directional, meaningful, replaying the most chemically significant events of the day to strengthen the synaptic pathways that will make the ant sharper, faster, and more effective tomorrow. Now, you might reasonably ask whether a brain containing only 250,000 neurons is even capable of generating something like that. After all, the human brain contains 86 billion neurons. That gap seems almost too vast to bridge. How could anything resembling a dream fit inside something smaller than a grain of sand? But this question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about what brains actually do. And modern neuroscience has a striking answer. An ant's brain is not simple. It is compressed. The mushroom bodies, even in the smallest ant species, pack olfactory processing circuits at the absolute physical limit of biological miniaturization. Studies have found that these structures are as densely wired as physics allows while still functioning. The ant's brain has been optimized by hundreds of millions of years of evolution to do maximum cognitive work in minimum space. And a landmark 2020 meta-analysis from UCLA examining sleep patterns across hundreds of species found something that now appears to be universal. Any organism that learns must sleep, because learning creates new synaptic connections, and those connections generate metabolic waste products that accumulate and eventually impair function. The brain must periodically go offline, shutting down active processing to clear cellular debris, prune excess connections, and consolidate what matters into long-term storage. This is not a luxury. It is maintenance. It is as biologically necessary as eating, which means the conclusion neuroscientists are increasingly arriving at is this: complexity, not size, is what determines the capacity to dream. If a brain can learn, it must sleep. If it sleeps deeply enough to consolidate memory, what you observe on the outside is involuntary twitching of its primary sensory organs. And what that feels like on the inside, if it feels like anything at all, is a dream. Part 4. Not all ants dream equally. Here's the detail I didn't expect when I went deep into this research, and it's the one that has stayed with me the longest. The colony does not give all of its ants equal access to sleep. Worker ants average 4.8 hours of sleep per day, fragmented across those 253 micro-naps, almost never reaching the deep REM phase. They exist in a state of chronic, managed sleep deprivation, functional enough to work, but rarely rested enough to fully consolidate memory, or experience whatever happens in the deepest phase of sleep. Queen ants average 9.4 hours in longer, extended naps, sleeping together synchronously in the deepest, most protected chamber of the nest, regularly, consistently reaching REM sleep. The colony deliberately maintains this imbalance. It systematically sleep deprives its workers to keep 80% of the labor force active at all times, and the biological cost of that deprivation is stark, and measurable. Worker ants live 2 to 6 months. Queens live up to 7 years. The superorganism allows its queens to dream, and withholds that same recovery from its workers, for a coldly logical reason. The queen is the only individual in the colony whose reproductive line determines the colony's genetic future. She is irreplaceable. Workers, by the brutal calculus of superorganism biology, are not. They are expendable labor, and the colony treats them accordingly, right down to the architecture of their sleep. Even here, in a colony of insects operating on pure biological imperative, The ability to rest deeply, the ability to dream, turns out to be a resource, unequally distributed, reserved for those the system has decided matter most. Conclusion. So, do ants dream? Here is the honest, scientifically defensible answer. REM sleep is real. It is confirmed, documented, and peer-reviewed. During their deepest rest, fire ants experience involuntary rapid twitching of their primary sensory organs, the same structural and functional parallel that connects REM sleep to dreaming in humans, jumping spiders, honeybees, and octopuses. The pattern holds across radically different nervous systems, radically different body plans, radically different evolutionary lineages. Something ancient and fundamental is happening here. Whether there is something it is like to be that ant, whether the lights are on inside that RAM episode, whether a subjective experience is occurring inside that compressed, extraordinary, 250,000 neuron brain, that remains genuinely, profoundly unknown. It may be the deepest open question in all of biology, because it sits at the intersection of neuroscience and consciousness is the one thing science has not yet found a way to measure from the outside. But consider the logic carefully before you dismiss it. If an ant is sentient enough to subjectively experience the smell of food while awake, to have that chemical signal mean something, to motivate behavior to be encoded as memory, then on what grounds do we assume that when its brain replays that exact experience during sleep, no one is home, that the process runs, but the experience doesn't? We don't know. Science doesn't know. Not yet. But we are getting closer. And the question itself, the mere fact that it is now a serious scientific question, asked by serious researchers in peer-reviewed journals, says something profound about how wrong our assumptions about the insect world have been. The next time you see an ant sitting perfectly still in the corner of a room, antennae folded, unreachable, indifferent to everything around it, give it a moment. It might be somewhere else entirely.